Okay, guys. No more stalling, no more stalling. I'm going to go ahead and get this on out of the way. Hey, what's going on, movie lovers all over the world? Oh, I'm not going to even do all that. We're talking about Mother today, the 2017 American psychological horror film, which it's not a horror film, directed and written by Darren Aronofsky and stars Jennifer Lawrence, Javier, Bardem, Ed Harris, Michelle Pfeiffer, with Kristen Wiig also making an appearance as well. Alright guys, I am not going to worry about doing a non-spoilers review for this. We're going to talk about the movie. I'm not going to try to do a breakdown or give you like what this means and what this means. I'm going to go through, talk about the film in its entirety, and then I'm going to ultimately say how I interpreted this movie, and then we're going to get on out of here. So this is going to be a very short review, I guess you could say. All right. So if you can tell by the tone of my voice, I did not like the movie. I thought the movie was really good. Really great, I should say. Darren Aronofsky, say what you will about like some of his movies, as weird and outlandish as they are, they're good movies. I liked Black Swan. I liked Requiem for a Dream. Didn't care too much for Noah, but that's because more of my own personal beliefs. But with this film, I felt like he was taking what worked with Noah for some people and then what worked with Black Swan and ultimately combined it together, where again, Jennifer Lawrence is playing Mother, or as you could call her, Mother Earth. You also have Javier Bardem playing him, as he is largely referred to, or he's playing God essentially in the movie, which is one of the aspects of the movie I didn't like. And then of course you have Ed Harris in here as well as Michelle Pfeiffer, Domhnall Gleeson, and Brian Gleeson. The Gleeson brothers also make appearances in here. Again, Kristen Wiig is also in this movie to a certain degree. Again, she is ultimately, Kristen Wiig is Harold. She plays, again, the publisher of him. Again, Javier Bardem is an accomplished book writer, but he hasn't been able to write as of lately. Mother has been rebuilding his old home that essentially burned down, and is ultimately trying to help him get over his writer's block or his writing slump that he is currently in. And then one day, Ed Harris's character shows up at the house asking for a room. He had heard apparently this was a bed and breakfast or something. Javier Bardem welcomes him with open arms. Jennifer Lawrence's character is kind of like, okay, he can stay one night. Then again, then his wife shows up to stay, and then they have some weird interactions. Again, Michelle Pfeiffer and Jennifer Lawrence have some weird scenes together, specifically this weird scene about underwear and, honey, what kind of underwear are you wearing? And then she's like, it's laundry day, you know, the whole joke about putting on granny panties and whatnot, and she shows her what kind of underwear she wears. And there is a little funny scene where Jennifer Lawrence takes her underwear like with her hand like this and throws it in a corner like, I don't even want to see that anymore. So then eventually we get the couple's sons. They come because we end up finding out that Ed Harris's character is dying, and that he wanted to ultimately meet Bardem's character, the writer, and wanted to meet him. He was a big fan of him and everything. And so again, they also accidentally break and shatter this crystallized object, which is revealed to ultimately be the heart of Mother, essentially, the crystal. And again, I'll get to that. All right, so continuing forward, the two sons show up. The older son is mad because he won't be getting anything, and the younger son is going to be getting something. Soon they both get into a fight. The younger brother dies. And then again, Bardem's character, the man, Michelle Pfeiffer's character. Again, these characters don't have names. They're simply referred to as the man or a man or woman, and then Mother. The only one that actually has a name, essentially, I guess you could say, Kristen Wiig, but she's the Herald, and that's more so of a code word as well. And again, Bardem is referred to him as him, so you know. All right, so then we ultimately again see Mother coping with cleaning up the blood from the son who is ultimately killed. There's also a really creepy scene where the older son shows back up, but that's because he like forgot his phone or something like that, and he's still like leaving. Next morning, all of them show up and they have some kind of wake. and then they end up just like getting into it. So then Jennifer Lawrence basically goes on a tirade, and at this point she's put up a lot of crap with Bardem's character of letting strangers into their house, letting them have a wake in the house, being ultimately having to clean up behind them, seeing while also, you know, dealing with the fact that she's a neglected housewife, that Bardem doesn't really appreciate her or pay her that much attention. Ultimately, they get into a huge fight, and she says, "You won't even make love to me." They kiss passionately, and then they have sex. Then apparently the next morning, the mother announces that she is pregnant. The news leaves him elated, and and it inspires him to get back into writing. Again, a few months later, mother prepares for the arrival of the child, reads the newest piece she thinks is amazing. He already turned it to his publisher, already had it published. Soon, people just start showing up in droves to the house, like droves, because again, the book is just that great and that magnificent. People start showing up. Then we get real scenes where the room starts to just ultimately develop into chaos, especially when a sink gets broken ultimately. Then mother ultimately is at her wit's end. She goes into labor. She finds her husband. They go to his study where nobody is ultimately allowed, and he ultimately had it once barricaded. Once the man and his wife ultimately broke his crystallized thing, he boarded it off and wouldn't let nobody else in there. But when she gives birth to the baby, she's like, "I'm not going to let you see the baby because you will not ask these people to go." She ends up falling asleep. He takes the baby, wants to show him to the crowd. It gets passed through the crowd. Ultimately, in the ensuing chaos, the baby gets his neck broken. She's devastated, and then she walks ultimately to the front where she sees them having the baby on this ritualistic table, and they're all eating his flesh. From that point, she takes out a shard of glass and just starts stabbing people. They beat her up real badly. She makes it out to ultimately the cellar, which Darren Aronofsky kept referring to multiple times. She catches them all on fire, and she destroys the crowd, the house, and then of course some of the surrounding garden and trees as well, because it's oil and it's very explosive. Both mother and him survive, and then she is like really burned, and he's basically unscathed. That's where he reveals himself to be God. Once he's revealed himself to be God, he asks her, "Will you give your love to me? Ultimately, will you let me have the rest of your love?" He then tears open her chest, removing her heart in the process. As he crushes the heart, a large crystallized object is revealed, what we saw in the beginning of the film. He places the object on the pedestal, and once again, the house changes from a burnt-out husk to a newly renovated house, and a new mother forms in a bed, wakes up, wondering aloud where her husband is. All right, so Darren Aronofsky said that he wrote this in 5 days. He was watching the news. He was displeased about what was going on, and I can see that he wrote this in 5 days. Again, visually, the movie is great. It's beautiful. The story is a little jilted here and there to me. One of the things I feel like I have to talk about is this is not a horror film. There were a few like, oh, jump scare moments, but it's not a horror film. This is more of a statement piece. And I don't necessarily think you should be charging people to see a statement piece. I think this would have been a good rental on Netflix. But because, again, you can tell that audiences were ultimately expecting a horror film. And when they realized this is not a horror film, they were horribly disappointed by what was going on and decided to go see American Assassin instead. And I don't blame them. Again, I sat through this movie wondering what in the hell is going on? What does any of this mean? And apparently at some point, like doing like press screenings when they were showing this, they had a statement, paragraph written by Aronofsky himself explaining the whole, he wrote this in 5 days, what this ultimately is, and that ultimately tailored your mind saying, oh, this is not a horror film. I went in this thing and it's a horror film and there are no horrific events in here. So again, the trailer was very misleading. We have another concept of the misleading trailers. Again, same thing with It Comes at Night, had a very misleading trailer, and films have been doing that a lot lately. And I will say War for the Planet of the Apes was very misleading as well. And again, shameless plug, Chris Hacker and myself did a video talking about misleading trailers. Why is it bad and why is it ultimately good sometimes in terms of trailers and whatnot. I'll make sure I have that linked below and as well down in the description as well of this video. All right, so my interpretation of this film. Darren Aronofsky is saying that essentially God created us. You have ultimately the story of Adam and Eve in a way being told in here, where the fruit in this case is sex, and him is neglecting her because he doesn't want her to get that fruit, but mother ultimately wants the fruit. They have a baby, and then ultimately the baby ends up getting killed and his flesh is being eaten upon. Also, some religious aspects you could put in here as well. Domhnall Gleeson's character and Brian Gleeson, respectively. You have the whole Cain and Abel situation being played out here. Essentially, this is a scene saying that we, you know, how we treat each other for greed. We're all about greed and power and whatnot. And sometimes we ultimately end up choosing money and objects and material things over people, essentially. Same with what happened in this movie, ultimately, where the younger brother was ultimately killed because the oldest son was mad. So again, you have the whole Cain and Abel being played out. Again, Jennifer Lawrence is playing Mother Earth, essentially, or you could say that she's Eve in a way. But then that begs the question, okay, where's Adam at then? Again, you have Ed Harris and Michelle Pfeiffer. I feel like they're just commentary characters, same with Kristen Wiig, that were just added into this movie just to kind of move the scenes along a little bit. Again, they have no names, but code names, man, woman, and the Herald, essentially. Ultimately, I don't know why Kristen Wiig was in here. Really, I have no idea why Kristen Wiig was in here. I felt like you put Kristen Wiig in a movie, have her say some jokes or do something funny. Just don't have her be there just to be there. And again, she had some weird scenes where she takes part in the madness and starts executing fans point blank with gunshots to the head, which is kind of weird in itself. Ultimately, how I interpret this film, he's basically saying that the house is essentially Mother Earth, and we are not taking care of the house, essentially turning the whole world into ash and everything. We're letting everything consume us and burn around us. We fantasize and fanaticize over certain aspects of our life. We put people on these pedestals or objects or money, whatever have you, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to obtain that. And so again, towards the end of the film, we end up dying for it ultimately. And God is ultimately asking for our hearts to solely be focused in on him, which is why Mother, again, is serving him faithfully throughout the film. But then you see that she slowly starts to resent him for it. So he's saying that we should spend all our time and attention focusing on one thing. Again, whether you believe in God or not, he's saying that we should focus solely on him. Ultimately, that's how I take the film. Again, the religious undertones are very evident there. Again, you have Cain and Abel being referenced. You could have Adam and Eve being referenced. You have God ultimately being referenced in the movie. And like I said, I hated the movie, but I thought the movie looked beautiful and gorgeous. And I thought everyone acted their asses off in this movie. Like, seriously, everyone acted their asses off in this movie. They did a really good job of selling me on the film. It's just the overall movie itself just turned me off. The story and what he was trying to go for turned me off. So, again, the movie is subjective. Take what you will out of this. That's how I felt about it. Some people did like it. Some people hated it. Some people just want to never remember this movie again. I don't necessarily never want to remember it again. Again, I will say that Lawrence and Pfeiffer ultimately was good. They were the best parts about the film. Same thing with Bardem and Ed Harris, as little role as somewhat he had. I thought they all did a really good job acting wise. It's just the direction and the story and the disturbing and allegorical narrative that Aronofsky put in this film turned me off seriously. So I'm not going to recommend you guys go check this film out. This would be something you could rent at Redbox, or maybe go check it out on Netflix. Otherwise, go see American Assassin. Go see it. Go see Kingsman: The Golden Circle. Do not worry about this movie. Again, I know I say you need to support independent films and more original ideas, but this is something I cannot feel comfortable going to sing you out to see. Again, this is not a horror film. You're going to see it on Wikipedia, and you're going to see it on IMDb. This is not a horror film, not a psychological horror film, not a body horror film. This is not a horror film. This is a statement film that could have a few horrific statements to it. And this is even like It Comes at Night, where the horror itself is subjective, or where the horror itself is not about what you see on screen, but what people do to each other and what could be out there in the darkness. This is something completely different. So yeah, that's been my thoughts on Mother. My very long thoughts on Mother. Darren Aronofsky, you're a great director. You're a great writer. I have enjoyed a good percentage of your films, but Noah just turned me off, and this movie ultimately turned me off. And in terms of a score, I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. I mean, the acting was superb again, but the direction, the overall story, the disturbing and allegorical narrative that he inserted into this, and then the marketing, ultimately selling this as a horror movie, ultimately just turned me off. And I just can't recommend you go see this movie. 5 out of 10. How many cups I'm gonna give this? One cup. That's how many I'm gonna give this. Alright guys, hashtag how many cups. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I got more videos on the way. Make sure you check those out. Again, post your thoughts down below. Have you seen Mother? And if you have, what did you take from the movie? What did you think of it? Do you think it's a horror film? Again, I don't think it is, but again, entertainment is subjective. You might see differently. Thank you as always. And remember, as I always say, to become a savage, stay a savage, and peace out, y'all. Later.